Network.
And joining us up on the stage here is Chad from Crooked Stave and Garrett from Jester King. And we're going to start with Chad and Crooked Stave. So if we want to go ahead and start pouring that Crooked Stave beer, we're just going to do a quick little background on each of them, and then we're going to get into some of the beers that they brought here. So let's start with Chad. Chad, tell us a little bit about yourself and about Crooked Stave out of Colorado.
Cool. Thanks a lot. It says Chad Jacobson from Denver, Colorado, which is where Crooked Stave is. So we actually originally started our brewery up in Fort Collins, and we've always existed more as a barrel cellar. So we're a brewery that is aging all of our beers in oak, and a lot of them being fermented, actually all of them being fermented with Brettanomyces and a fair amount of bacteria to get nice tart, acidic character. About 2 years ago, we moved down to Denver, Colorado, and that's where we've been brewing all our beers since, and really kind of building up our barrel cellar. So again, a lot of beers aged in everything from large oak foeders to smaller wine barrels, and then blended through, and a lot of them being primary fermented with Brettanomyces. So I think a lot of the topics probably that we'll be talking about for the next 20 minutes or so are going to be based around kind of wild, sour beers, Brettanomyces, and it's really, as a brewery, what we've cut our teeth on producing. So
very cool. Tyler does sour beers down in Morro Bay, which is why I brought him up. So I'm going to let him ask some questions and get into breaking down sours, kind of the new thing, the it thing.
Yeah. One question I have: I know you guys got a cool ship recently. Have you ran anything through the cool ship yet, or is that?
We've not. The system's not quite up and going yet. So when we do, I think in the beginning it will really be actually more kind of hop forward beers.
Okay.
And stuff, kind of using it as a big hop back.
Gotcha. Okay.
So yeah, not sure the building that we're in will be really adequate for, say, spontaneous or cool ship beers, kind of old industrial.
Right. So
at least not yet.
Get a cool ship in there?
Yeah. We've got the cool ship up top. Okay. Yeah, we're just going to use it for actually kind of actually traditional uses, but instead of leaving it kind of overnight and letting it cool, running it through it and stuff. We can maybe even ferment some smaller batches in there as a wide kind of shallow vessel, but it'll be kind of for settling before running off through the heat exchanger into the fermenters.
Cool.
Not quite as cool as doing some spontaneous in it, but maybe in the future.
Gotcha. Yeah, there's got to be enough bugs floating around there with all those barrels. There's got to be something in there.
I think that'll be the thing. If we had it at the barrel cellar, that's when we'd be able to probably do it. There's got to be enough Brett and bacteria all over that place to certainly be able to do it.
So you were saying you run everything for your foeders first and then into smaller barrels?
Yeah, the way we run our system is that for a lot of the beers, we go into the foeders first, kind of consider it our base beer. So after primary fermentation, and for a long while now, we've been doing primary fermentation even in the large oak foeders. So primary fermentation in the large oak foeders, secondary aging into other large oak foeders, and then for a lot of the longer age sours, we then we'll blend together barrels, rinse those, and then from the foeder into the barrels. And so through doing this, we have a long conditioning period of maybe 12 to 18 months, but actually in the red wine barrels where we're building up a little bit more of the acidity is shorter because we don't want the beer to get too acidic too fast. So in the foeders, we're really trying to hold them more with the Brettanomyces character so we can start to build and develop that characteristic.
Oh, cool. Yeah, what are they pouring out there? Is that the...
So we got two beers that hopefully we're coming around with, VA and Surette, both what we consider very traditional saisons. VA means old in the idea of like old tradition. So saison is one of a more historic style of beers, brewed kind of by farmers, Belgium, pretty well-known Belgian style. It's actually the hoppier of Belgian beers, but they use the hops same way you think of like Old World IPA from England, where the hops kind of helped keep the bacteria from forming too quickly. So saison was always aged 6 months, always aged in oak, always spent time doing that. Because we're talking about 17th, 18th century brewing now, where farmers used the grains, they brewed at the end of the harvest season, and then the beer sat over the winter and then was used from spring planting, summer planting, and through harvest. And so both of them are saisons. Surette, a little bit more Vision saison, tart, vinous character, whereas the VA, a little bit lighter, nice golden character, but lightly dry hopped. So saison brewers were actually some of the first really to dry hop. And the reason why they did that was to reliven the beer. It actually was called relivening. they would often blend lambic into the beer, so they were buying lambic from some of the brewers not too far up in Brussels and from the Seine Val. And so it had the very tart characteristic. And by dry hopping, you reliven the beer to bring back some of that hop characteristic. So we do that in VA, just dry hop it a little bit, give it kind of grassy, citrusy note. Surette, we don't do that so much. Surette, we leave as it is, nice tart, vinous, almost white wine-like characteristics as it really ages and becomes tart.
And is that going to change in the bottle at all from that, or are the hops going to kind of stop everything from happening and sit, or is that something you could age in your cellar for a couple years and still be good, or change? Or?
Yeah, all our beers really age really well and get better. It's one of the weirdest things as a brewer to produce beer where you release it and you're really excited about the beer. You're like, this is tasting great. Then you have it 6 months later and you're just, fuck, this is so much better. And it makes you think back to when you first released it. You're like, but when we released it, like it was good then. No, it was great, but it's better now. It's a weird thing because that's not how it is in brewing. We in general we're like, fresh is better. I love getting this beer fresh. So VA is one that's a lot of fun because, especially around the brewery, we love VA fresh. We love after we've just dry hopped it and we get that nice dry hop characteristic. But as it ages, and this batch actually is 3 months old now since we packaged it, so the hop characteristic in this VA is almost not even really there. You get a little grassy, a little earthy, a little bit of those citrusy tones, because as the hops drop out, it's a dry hop at the end. So as kind of the aroma and the character drops out, that acidity still builds. So it ages really nicely. So you kind of get to play around with the beer when in the beginning, nice, fresh, citrusy, hop characteristics, floral, and then as it dies off and the bacteria grows up, the beer gets more and more tart. So actually, like a Belgian Lambic or a Goose, has great aging potential because of the hops that are there, because of the Brettanomyces, because of the bacteria. So it gets to go through a long range of transformation, age for quite a while.
Excellent. Chad, everybody from Crooked Stave, how about those two right there? Yeah? Yums. All right, and next up, and I mean this with all due respect and the greatest of compliments, but one of the four of us up here is from Austin, Texas. I'm not sure if we can tell which one. He's either a brewmaster or he's a musician. We love Austin, Texas. From Jester King, this is Garrett. Welcome, Garrett.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Garrett from Austin, from Jester King. Happy to be here. We're a really small kind of country brewery out in the outskirts of Austin, making wild beers.
Making wild beers, a lot of really exciting, cutting-edge things. I love the imagery, the branding, the marketing, everything you guys put into this is really, really cool. And talk about West Texas and the Hill Country and how that plays into what you guys are doing down there. It's very much like we talk about here in the wine industry, and this won't be the first wine industry reference I make because that's where most of my background is from, but the terroir, where you're from, the water, how it all affects what you guys are doing down there.
Yeah, where our brewery is situated actually looks really similar to the landscape here. We don't really have mountains like this. We have hills, but there are a lot of wineries. There's a winery about a mile down the road from us, so we're kind of like in the wine country of Texas. And we ferment everything with a mixed culture of yeast and bacteria, and some of that was once lab-cultured yeast, but it's kind of mutated into its own thing by this point. But a lot of the yeast and bacteria in that blend has come from like flowers on the property, from the air, so it is more or less representative of our surroundings. And we use well water also, and we blend a little RO into our well water to kind of cut the hardness, but we use well water from the aquifer right beneath the brewery. And yeah. Sometimes our beer varies from batch to batch a lot, and that's intentional. I kind of embrace inconsistency, but when we first started out, we were using 100% well water, but that was really high, very hard water. So we've cut it, and it kind of experimented with different ratios of blending RO, reverse osmosis water. But we want to get back to using only well water, and we will, just even if it means using more grain to get better efficiencies, whatever, that's fine. Yeah.
So it's mainly messing with your efficiencies on that?
Yeah, it is. We have pH issues with our mash, with the water being so alkaline, but I'd rather not tamper the water and use it as is, because it tastes great. Like drinking it tastes awesome. It's very milky. Like it even looks kind of white when it comes out of the well, but we have it, and it's good, so might as well use it as is.
Nice. And what are we drinking now? What's the
this is Nocturne Chrysalis. So this is it's a barrel aged beer re-fermented with Marion blackberries from Oregon. Yeah, this is batch 2. Batch 1 we used Texas blackberries, but the quality of the fruit was not quite what we wanted, so we sought some other sources, and these were great.
And when you're adding the fruit, are you rinsing that first? Are you freezing it?
No
are
way.
You doing anything?
Well, with berries we use frozen fruit because we get much better results. Not for the sake of like sterilizing it. I mean, we want wild yeast from fruit in our beer and bacteria. But as far as extraction goes, when we use like fresh berries, we'll get a lot of acetic character, like vinegary notes in our beer that we don't. Well, I know a lot of people really like that, but we don't really want that in our beer very much. So we found that using frozen berries, it breaks down the cell walls in the fruit, therefore facilitating a more efficient fermentation, and we get much better fruit character that way.
And when you add the fruit, are you adding it into the barrels themselves? Or are you transferring to another larger?
Early on, when we were doing smaller runs, we added it to the barrels, which kind of created a nightmare for getting the beer out. But now our process for kind of our larger, like 30 barrel batches of fruit beers, we'll rack the fruit into a stainless steel tank and then get a blend of barrels and then blend those barrels in, and that's kind of let it re-ferment in a tank and then package from there.
Let me ask both of you, really, as you guys do, I guess what I'll call more artisan, specialized types of beer and types of brewing, what are some of the biggest challenges? We start in Texas, maybe with the drought, something that we can relate to here in California, challenges with the drought, challenges with water issues.
Yeah, with us, I mean, there are water issues. I mean, we'll go like 8 months at a time where it just doesn't rain. But we pull water from the Trinity Aquifer, which is really, really deep down. And we don't really have any issues with our well running dry or anything like that. In the city, though, I know there are potential issues if you're using like municipal water with like water rationing and things like that. And that could affect breweries there. But we're kind of outside of like the proper city line, so it's cowboy no man's land, Yeah,
exactly. He doesn't look like a cowboy, but he's cowboy rules apply.
Cowboy at heart.
Yeah, cowboy at heart. Very good.
Yeehaw.
And then Chad, let me ask you about some of the challenges for you in Colorado, different environment, different terroirs and whatnot. But what are some of the challenges you have with some of your smaller projects that you're always working on?
I think a lot of the stuff for us becomes process driven. I mean, you can kind of look at it across a couple of different avenues. Certainly we don't have a brew house. So for us is working with a brewer to be able to brew at their brew house, really produce the type of beers that we want. It's very specific to the mash, the grist, to what we're looking to get out of that based on whether we're doing primary fermentation with Brettanomyces or mixed culture fermentation, and then the process through. So, you're always looking to make the best beer possible. And as an artisan brewery, as a smaller brewery, we have, sometimes less at our fingertips to be able to work with. So being able to get that best beer brewed right, being able to get it back to the barrel cellar quickly to be able to ferment, looking through the process, and then just playing around with the wild organisms. I mean, there's so much that's really left up to feel and to chance and everything. So as we work with it, as we learn more about the beers, okay, why are we seeing this happen in a certain fermentation? Why are we seeing this happen here? Okay, how can we do this? Because really wanting to make the best beer possible and to keep it the best beer possible. So from the time you bottle it, if someone's drinking it at any period throughout time, that they're always getting the best experience from that beer as well. Because you are releasing it after it's aged for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, and you want it always to be continuously getting better. So how your process kind of dictates that, is affected by it, and working on it. So spend a lot of time doing that.
Awesome. We have a microphone right down front here, folks. We encourage you to come up. You want to ask a question, please do so. Don't be shy. Come on up. It's right out here in front of the stage. Anybody want to ask any questions? We've got a great opportunity here. Here's a volunteer. Come on up.
This is for Crooked Stave, Chaz. Great product. But fodder is another great word. I just like saying fodder. It's temperature control, because you're in a fodder and you're in Colorado. Do you notice difference between your beers, depending upon when you start fermentation, wintertime, or how, what's going on there?
Definitely. As we first got into our barrel cellar, it was really warm months of summer. So we moved in July, started getting everything moved in, really started ramping up through fall. And by ramping up, I mean we don't even make 1,000 barrels, so I guess it's kind of relative. But we started to get the fooders in and started brewing bigger batches and everything, getting it in, a lot more beer aging. And first time through, any time you're inoculating a barrel, things are slower. Yeast get acclimated. But then it also kind of hit into winter, and things just really were just kind of chill, kind of steady. And we got into summer. It's more time, yeast more acclimated, keeps going, so things got going faster. But you really see things accelerate through the summer. But in Colorado, it's actually interesting being out here. I can't believe there's somewhere else that's more yellow than Colorado. I thought we were just a desert. But it's beautiful. It kind of makes me feel at home being here and see the green trees, but then see the landscape and everything. So I think people here can kind of relate to, except for we don't have as much humidity either. Luckily here you still have the humidity. So it can be very tough in Denver with how dry it is, how hot it is during the summer as well, because it's high alpine desert. So it was important to all of a sudden that first summer get a swamp cooler in, get temperatures down, get humidity up in the barrels, and then in winter making sure that we actually had humidity still being higher, but then also some heat. So we're trying to kind of get things to regulate a little bit, but at the same time, it's important to look at how things work with organisms, and also not to touch things too much. So certainly in the summer, we don't want it to get to be 80 degrees for the beer. That's not going to be good for the organisms. Things are going to take off too fast. So we have to keep the temperatures down a little bit. But I like just being in Belgium recently and getting to see all the caves, all the cellars that all the wines are aged in, especially like through France. But also for a lot of the Belgian brewers and everything, looking at humidity and temperatures and seeing how they get fluctuations through winter and through summer. And it's kind of always my thing that I think it's good to have seasons even in your barrels, even with the organisms. So it's not just one constant temperature the entire time, but instead you have, kind of ebb and flow for them. So
awesome. Very cool. Any other questions real quick? If not, we'll just we'll end on... Oh, we got one more here. Okay. Real quick.
A question. I think many people who have made barrel beers have occasionally had to dump some barrels or to blend them a very little bit into others. Do either of you have experience with barrels that didn't work out quite right, and how did you let that inform the rest of the beer or not?
Yeah. Really, the only time we dump barrels is if they become acidic or vinegary. If we smell it and there's a lot of ethyl acetate on it, there's kind of a threshold for us where okay, yeah, this is salvageable. We can blend it, and then if it's beyond that, it's we're not even a little bit. We'll dump it out. Yeah, Acidic character is really the only thing. Everything else, I mean, even if if the beer is thin and it's still sour, we can use that. We can kind of brighten up a beer with something like that, but vinegar is not really what we want to make. Yeah, Chad?
We're fortunate enough that we still have not dumped any barrels yet. I'm trying to think. That's not true, actually. We had, kind of on the other side, Colorado has awesome water because 90% of the rivers in the United States start in Colorado. They're pretty weak and measly, and then they get bigger as they leave the state. But we, in general, have really, really clean water in Colorado, really fresh snow melt and everything that feeds to the aquifers. But moving from making beer in Fort Collins to in Denver, one of the things that changed was the way the municipalities process water. So we had water issues with some of our 100% Brettanomyces beers. We were picking up a chloral phenol characteristic, and never had happened before, and then all of a sudden just showed up and went batch to batch. And when we first saw it, we saw it in a hoppy beer, Hop Savant, that we make. So we thought, this is kind of diesel-y, very hop-forward, sulfury characteristics from the hop. So this will clean up with the Brett. So the beers got released, and as I went back and looked more at it, kind of broke things down, looked at it, what I realized was Denver has water which have chloramines in it. So you either use water with chlorine or chloramine. Chlorine, vape off really easily in a boil, just holding time. Chloramines, on the other hand, pretty nice filtration system. through carbon filtration and a residence time that's needed to strip those chloramines away. So the Brettanomyces was taking that, turning it into chloramines. So we had it then happen to another 2 batches and transferred them into totes and have distilled them off and are aging them as spirits. So there'll be some Crooked Stave spirits coming out in the not too distant future. And that was something that was nice that we were able to do because that chlorophenolic characteristic comes off in the distillation process, so it wasn't a problem. And so that was kind of nice to be able to play around with. And we'll see, we've got it aging in some tequila, old tequila barrels, old bourbon barrels as well. So kind of a Crooked Stave spirit. So
Awesome. Real quick, Chad from Crooked Stave, what else are you pouring over at the booth?
Fun stuff. So VA and Surrett, as we tried here today, are 2 barrel-aged saisons that are nicely tart, a little dry hop for the VA. We've also got St. Bretta. So St. Bretta is a beer that we change the citrus seasonally. So we're pouring spring, which is mini Olatangelos, primary fermented large oak foeders, 100% Brettanomyces, but with a nice mixed bacterial culture. So very tart, very citrusy, and Librette de Blackberry. So some purple beer, golden sour, re-fermented with blackberries.
Awesome. And Garrett from Jester King, what else you guys pouring over at your booth there?
Yeah, in addition to the Nocturne Chrysalis blackberry sour, we're pouring Le Petit Prince, which is a farmhouse table beer, 2.9% alcohol, fermented with a mixed culture. Actually, it's a beer that's dry hop, so when it's fresh, it's very hoppy. Almost Pilsner-like, but now what we're pouring is about 9 months old, so the hops have faded out, and the wild yeast character has really kind of presented itself, and it's one of my favorite beers that we make.
Awesome. Big round of applause for these guys. Garrett, Jester King, Chad, Crooked Stave. Thank you. Go see them at their booths. We're just a few minutes away. We'll get another one going here with Garage Project in just a bit.